In the second Unit 2 video, we're going to walk through creating a residual plot. Now, in the previous video, we talked about how to run that regression function, and it gives us the regression equation, namely the slope, the y-intercept. It's in that F4 calc, all right, and everything's in here. So when we run that, it gives us this information, and that's when we get this new list popping up on the right side of our table. So you'll see that resid list, and these are the residuals for every point in the graph. So sometimes we're going to want to look at the residual plot for a regression equation. We really always want to look at it because it's going to clue us into whether or not our data is actually linear. So let's go back into our plot setup. All right, and we're going to change our plot. So let's hit define. Okay, we're keeping it as a scatter plot. So let's just go down to list 2 and hit the clear button to erase that. All right, so we're still using those chest sizes as list 1, but instead of plotting them against the weights of the bears, we're going to plot them against the residuals for those points, which were calculated when we ran that regression. So this graph won't work if we haven't already done that F4 calc, okay, regression equation and running the linear regression, okay, because that's what actually creates these residuals. So we're going to hit the second key. We're going to hit the minus sign to get to our variable link. And we're used to picking something right on the top up here. All right, but that's not going to work for this. So instead, this time we're going to go down, okay, until we get to a whole nother bucket. All right, so if we look, originally we were in main. That's where list 1 and list 2 and everything are. All right, but it's not in main, and we can just collapse that if we want to. Whoops. We'll go do that over. Okay, collapse it with the back arrow, does it. All right, to see the stat variables menu. Okay, so in stat variables, instead of main, if we go down to the functions that start with R, we'll see the resid list here. All right, so we want to set up our scatter plot with that list 1 and the resid list, and then we want to go ahead and graph it. Okay, diamond F3. And let's see, this is this line that it's graphing is from our regression equation. I want to clear that out because we don't need to look at that right now. So we don't see anything, which is because we need to zoom to the data. So F2, 9 button will zoom to the data. All right, and this is our residual plot. So notice it looks a lot different than the scatter plot. Scatter plot, we saw something that was generally a straight line. Residual plot, we don't. Okay, and this is actually what we want to see in a residual plot. We want a huge amount of scatter where there's really no detectable patterns. Okay, if we see a pattern in here, like a lot of times, one of the common things we can see is almost like a parabola. All right, and if we see something like that, it's telling us that we're trying to run a linear regression on data that's not actually linear. All right, so a residual plot that looks sufficiently scattered with the points spread out and no real patterns. Okay, we don't want to see a straight line. We don't want to see like a U shape. Sufficient scatter is telling us this is an appropriate model to use for those points. It's okay to do a linear regression on those points when we see something like this.